The Galactic Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds, but no fleet had ever ignored a Terran warning and survived. The approaching storm, the Kryn sovereignty, had ruled the galaxy for 6 million years. Their empire stretched across 8,000 star systems, each one claimed through overwhelming force and absolute dominance. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They arrived, they conquered, and they absorbed everything into their eternal machine of expansion. Supreme Overlord Thaxus sat upon his command throne, aboard the massive flagship. Dominion's fist. He was ancient beyond mortal comprehension. His body had been rebuilt and enhanced countless times with technology that blurred the line between biology and machinery. His mind held memories spanning millions of years, cataloging the rise and fall of thousands of civilizations. In all that vast stretch of time, across all those countless conquests, he had never once experienced defeat. Today, his armada hung at the edge of an insignificant region of space. 2,500 warships floated in the darkness like patient hunters. Each vessel was a testament to Kryn engineering, bristling with weapons capable of reducing planets to molten slag. Each ship carried thousands of soldiers trained in the art of total war. Together, they represented the largest military deployment the Kryn had assembled in 3,000 years, and they were here for humanity. The humans were a young species by galactic standards. They had made first contact with the wider galaxy only 180 years ago. They controlled a modest 52 star systems scattered across a relatively small section of the galactic arm. Their technology appeared primitive compared to the great powers of the galaxy. Their military seemed small and unremarkable. By every standard measurement the Kryn used to evaluate potential conquests, humanity should have been trivial to absorb, but the Kryn had rules. Every inhabited system must acknowledge Kryn authority. Every species must accept their place in the sovereignty. There were no exceptions. There could be no exceptions because exceptions bred resistance, and resistance threatened the perfect order Thaxus had spent millions of years constructing. So the Armada had come, and Thaxus had sent his most skilled emissary to deliver the proclamation of annexation. Commander Sarah. Chun stood at the observation window of Frontier Station Delta 9 and watched the Kryn fleet hanging in the distance. She was 47 years old, with sharp features and eyes that had witnessed too many war simulations to count. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her uniform bore the insignia of Terran Outer Defense Command, a position she had held for 9 years, 9 years of watching, 9 years of waiting, 9 years of preparing for exactly this moment. Her communications officer approached quietly. Commander, the Kryn shuttle has docked. The emissary is being escorted to Conference Bay 3 as requested. Chan nodded without turning from the window. I'll be there in 2 minutes. Make sure the recording systems are active. I want every word documented. Yes, Commander. The officer hesitated. Central Command is requesting a status update. Chan allowed herself a small, tight smile. Tell Central Command that the situation is proceeding exactly as anticipated. All protocols are ready for activation. The conference bay was deliberately unremarkable. Plain metal walls, a simple table made of synthetic material, basic lighting that cast no dramatic shadows. Chan had chosen this room specifically because it conveyed nothing about human capabilities. It was functional and forgettable, exactly the impression she wanted to create. The emissary who entered the room was anything but forgettable. Vorath stood nearly 9 feet tall, his body covered in intricate armor that seemed to shift colors in the light. His face was angular and elegant in a way that human eyes found unsettling, as if the proportions were almost right but somehow fundamentally wrong. When he moved, it was with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known fear. I am Vorath, voice of the Supreme Overlord, herald of the Kryn sovereignty, he announced. His voice resonated through the room with unnatural clarity. I bring proclamation from his eternal excellence, Thaxus the Undying, master of 8,000 stars. Conqueror of, know who sent you, Chun interrupted calmly. She gestured to a chair. Please sit. Deliver your message. Voroth's eyes narrowed dangerously. In 6 million years of Kryn history, no one interrupted a formal proclamation. No one dared to show such casual disrespect to a herald of the sovereignty. For a brief moment, he considered simply killing this insolent creature where she stood. But protocols existed for a reason. The forms must be observed even for species about to be erased from independence. He sat, though the human furniture was inadequate for his frame. The Kryn sovereignty claims rightful dominion over all inhabited space within our sphere of influence. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is a statement of inevitable reality. He placed a crystalline data device on the table. It pulsed with soft amber light. These are the terms of your integration into the sovereignty. You will immediately dismantle all military installations and vessels. You will open all colonies and systems to Kryn governance. You will provide resources and labor as directed by regional administrators. Your leadership will swear eternal loyalty to Supreme Overlord Thaxus. Voroth leaned forward, his alien features hardening. In exchange for your complete and unconditional surrender, your species will be permitted to continue existing. This is a generous offer. Most species receive no such opportunity. Commander Chen looked at the crystal, but made no move to touch it. And if we refuse? Voroth's laugh was like glass breaking. Refuse? Species do not refuse the Kryn sovereignty. Those foolish enough to try are no longer species. They are cautionary tales. They are examples we show to others so they understand the cost of defiance. He stood, his full height dominating the small room. I have personally delivered this proclamation to 412 civilizations across 3 million years of service. Do you know how many refused our generous terms? Tell me, Chun said, quietly. 17. 17 species thought themselves special. 17 species believed they could stand against the sovereignty. His voice dropped to something cold and final. There is no trace of them remaining in this universe. Not their people, not their worlds, not their history, not even their names. They are less than forgotten. They simply never were. He placed both hands on the table and leaned down until his face was level with Chun's. So, I ask you, Commander Sarah Chen of the Primitive Terran Defense Force, do you wish for your species to simply never have been? The room fell silent. Outside the station, 2,500 warships waited with weapons that could crack moons. Inside this small conference bay, a single human woman sat across from a being who had witnessed the extinction of worlds. Commander Chen reached into her jacket and withdrew a small data chip. She placed it carefully on the table between them. This is Terran Command's official response to your proclamation. Voroth picked up the chip with something approaching curiosity. He activated it, and a holographic display materialized above the table. The message was brief, written in flawless Kryn script. It read, "Your terms are rejected. You are prohibited from crossing this border. This is your only warning." For several seconds, Voroth simply stared at the words. Then he began to laugh. Not the cruel laugh from before, but genuine amusement bordering on delight. He laughed so hard that his armor chimed with the movement of his shoulders. Prohibited, he managed between laughs. You prohibit us? A species barely 2 centuries into the galactic community. A species with 52 minor systems and a handful of outdated vessels. You prohibit the Kryn sovereignty? Yes, Chun replied. Her voice was absolutely steady. Her expression revealed nothing. That is exactly what we are doing. Voroth's laughter died abruptly. He studied her with new attention, trying to determine if this was elaborate theater or genuine insanity. You are either extraordinarily brave or catastrophically ignorant. I cannot determine which. Perhaps both, Chun said. But my statement stands. You may not cross this border. If you do, there will be consequences. Consequences. Voroth stood to his full imposing height. Let me explain consequences to you, tiny human. In exactly 8 hours, our fleet will cross your border. In exactly 8 days, we will reach your homeworld. In exactly 8 weeks, humanity will be a footnote in Kryn administrative records. That is the consequence of your refusal. That is what happens when primitive species forget their place. Commander Chen stood as well. She was small compared to the towering emissary, fragile and mortal. But her eyes held something Borith had not expected to see. Absolute certainty. Then I suppose we have nothing more to discuss, she said. Safe travels, emissary. I hope you remember this conversation in the days ahead. Borith turned toward the door, then paused at the threshold. I will remember you, Commander Chen. When your species is absorbed and your worlds are administered by Kryn governors, I will remember that one of you had the courage to look me in the eye and speak defiance. It will not save you, but I will remember. Then he was gone. Commander Chen stood alone in the conference bay for several long moments. Then she activated the communication panel embedded in the table. This is Chan. The emissary has departed. They rejected our warning. Understood, Commander. The voice belonged to Admiral Marcus Webb, head of Terran Strategic Operations. What are your orders? Initiate Protocol Sentinel. Activate all dimensional anchors. Move the civilian population to designated shelters. And Marcus? Yes, Commander? Tell everyone to get some rest. It's going to be a very interesting week. 8 hours later. The Kryn fleet crossed the border. 2,500 warships advanced in perfect formation, their engines burning bright against the cosmic dark. Supreme Overlord Thaxis watched from his throne with the bored expression of someone who had witnessed this scene 10,000 times before. The humans would resist briefly, then collapse. They always collapsed. Every species collapsed eventually as the fleet crossed the invisible boundary that marked human-claimed space. Something strange occurred. Every sensor on every ship simultaneously went dark. Not damaged, not disrupted, simply offline. For exactly 5 seconds, 2,500 warships flew completely blind through space. Then the sensors reactivated. Everything appeared normal. No weapons fire had struck them. No mines had detonated. The fleet continued forward without incident. What was that? Daxus demanded from his throne. His senior technician approached cautiously. Unknown, Your Excellence. It appears to have been some form of energy pulse that affected all vessels simultaneously. However, diagnostics show no damage to any systems. A sensor malfunction? Possibly, Your Excellence. Space in unexplored regions can produce unusual energy phenomena. It may have been a natural occurrence. Thaxis considered this explanation. A natural phenomenon made sense. These humans were primitive. They could not possibly possess technology capable of affecting his entire fleet at once without causing detectable damage. It was nothing. A coincidence. Continue forward, he commanded. Maximum acceleration toward Earth. I want this conquest completed quickly. The fleet pushed deeper into human territory at unprecedented speed, and somewhere in the darkness behind them, in spaces between spaces that Kryn sensors were not designed to detect, something vast and patient began to move. Dimensional anchors activated in sequence, creating an invisible cage that the Kryn fleet could not perceive. Pocket universes overlapped with normal space. Bending the laws of physics in ways that should have been impossible, the trap was closing. Layer by layer, hour by hour, and the Kryn sovereignty, in all its ancient arrogance, noticed nothing at all. The invisible cage. 4 days had passed since the Kryn fleet crossed into human territory. 4 days of steady advancement toward Earth. 4 days of nothing. That nothing was beginning to feel deeply wrong. Science. Officer Kilara stood in the observation laboratory of the Dominion's fist. Her 6-fingered hands moving across holographic displays that showed increasingly impossible data. She was Valyrian, a species the Kryn had conquered 40,000 years ago. Her people had possessed a natural gift for understanding spatial mathematics and dimensional physics, which made them valuable to the sovereignty as technical. Specialist thought now that gift was telling her something. That made no logical sense. The fleet's navigation log showed they had traveled 2,000 light years deeper into human space. The star charts confirmed their position. The computational systems verified the distance covered. But Kalara's instruments were detecting something else entirely. Something the standard Kryn systems were not designed to notice. The gravitational constant was fluctuating. Not by much, just 0.003% variations, but those variations were occurring in patterns. Regular patterns. Artificial patterns. Space itself was being manipulated around them. Officer Kalara. The voice came from behind her. She turned to find Fleet Commander Zarek standing in the laboratory entrance. He was massive even by Kryn standards. His body augmented with military-grade enhancements that made him capable of crushing steel with his bare hands. But his eyes held intelligence that went beyond mere physical power. Commander? Kalara acknowledged. Straightening to attention. ZEX waved away the formality and approached her workstation. I have been reviewing the reports you submitted to my office. The ones about spatial anomalies? His voice was low, careful. Tell me what you truly think is happening. Kalara hesitated. Speaking uncomfortable truths to Kryn commanders was dangerous. But Zarek had a reputation for valuing accuracy over reassurance. Commander, I believe we are not traveling through normal space, she said quietly. The mathematical models suggest we are moving through artificially generated pocket dimensions that intersect with baseline reality. Zarek's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened with focus. Explain. Kalara brought up a three-dimensional model of the fleet's trajectory. According to our standard instruments, we have been traveling in a straight line toward the human homeworld. But when I analyze the gravitational signatures and quantum field variations, the data suggests something very different. She manipulated the display, adding layers of colored overlays that represented dimensional stress patterns. We are traveling in loops, Commander. Very large loops through folded space. The humans have created what I can only describe as a maze of pocket universes, and we have been navigating through it without realizing. That would require technology far beyond what intelligence reports indicated humans possess, Zarek said carefully. Yes, Commander. It would. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, watching the impossible mathematics scroll across the displays. How long have we been in this maze? Zarek finally asked. Lara pulled up another set of calculations. Based on the pattern analysis, I believe we entered it the moment we crossed the border. The energy pulse that affected all sensors 4 days ago was not a malfunction or natural phenomenon. It was them, the humans. They were marking us somehow, tagging our vessels so their dimensional systems could track our position within the pocket spaces. Zarek's jaw tightened. And the scout ships we sent ahead? The ones that stopped transmitting? They likely traveled beyond the boundaries of the controlled dimensional space. Once outside the pocket universes, they would have been unable to communicate back to us through the dimensional barriers. They may still be intact, Commander, but lost in normal space while we continue through the maze. Or they encountered something else entirely, Zarek said grimly. He turned to face Kalara directly. Can you prove any of this? Can you show me evidence that would convince Supreme Overlord Thaxus? Kalara pulled up her final analysis screen. It showed a comparison of expected stellar positions versus actual observed stellar positions. The discrepancies were minute, but undeniable. This star cluster should be visible from our current position, according to standard navigation. It is not. This nebula should not be visible for another week of travel. It is clearly observable now. The universe is not where it should be, Commander, because we are not where we think we are. Zarek studied the data with the practiced eye of someone who had commanded fleets for 70,000 years. His expression grew darker with each passing second. The humans lied, he said quietly. They lied about everything. Their technology, their capabilities, their strength. They have been deceiving the entire galaxy. Or protecting themselves, Kalara offered carefully. A species with technology this advanced would be a target for conquest by every major power. Perhaps they chose to appear weak deliberately. For 180 years? That would require extraordinary discipline and strategic patience. Xerx's eyes widened slightly as the implications settled into place. They have been preparing. Since the moment they made first contact with galactic civilization, they have been preparing specifically for this. For invasion? For us? He turned abruptly toward the door. I need to speak with the Supreme Overlord immediately. We need to stop this advance and reassess, Commander. Kalara's urgent voice stopped him. Look at this. She had brought up the long-range sensor display. It showed something that should not have been possible. Ships. Thousands of ships. Appearing from nowhere in the space behind the Kryn fleet, Xerx stared at the display in disbelief. The vessels were materializing from points in space where nothing had existed moments before. They were not decloaking from stealth systems. They were literally emerging from tiers in dimensional space, stepping from one layer of reality into another as casually as walking through a doorway. How many? Xerx's voice was barely above a whisper. Kalara's hand shook as she worked the calculations. Initial count shows 4,300 vessels, Commander. And more are still appearing. 4,300 ships. The humans had more ships in this single engagement than intelligence reports suggested they possessed in their entire military. And they had hidden them all in dimensional folds, waiting, watching, letting the Kryn fleet walk deeper and deeper into their trap. Sound battle alert, Xerx commanded, his voice sharp with authority. All ships to combat readiness. Defensive formation Omega-7. And get me a direct link to Supreme Overlord Thaxus immediately. In his throne chamber aboard the Dominion's Fist. Supreme Overlord Thaxus listened to Fleet Commander Xerx's report with growing fury. You are telling me that this primitive species has trapped our fleet using technology that should not exist? Thaxus said, his voice dangerously calm. You are telling me that we have been traveling through artificial dimensions for 4 days without detecting them. You are telling me that we are now surrounded by a force larger than our own. Yes, Your Excellence, Xerx replied. That is exactly what I'm telling you. We need to halt our advance immediately, and we halt for nothing, Thaxus interrupted. The Kryn sovereignty does not retreat. We do not show weakness. These humans have constructed an elaborate deception, but deception means nothing against superior firepower. Your Excellence, our weapons may not be effective against silence. Thaxus rose from his throne, his ancient frame radiating fury. I have conquered species with technology that rivaled the gods themselves. I have broken civilizations that wielded power beyond comprehension. I will not be intimidated by clever parlor tricks from a species that has existed for a cosmic eye blink. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Supreme Overlord Thaxus. We are being tested by an enemy that hopes to defeat us through fear and illusion. They believe that spectacle can replace strength. They are wrong. All vessels will continue toward Earth at maximum speed. If these human ships attempt to interfere, destroy them, show them what true power means. Xerx's face appeared on the communication screen, his expression troubled. Your Excellence, I strongly advise. Your advice is noted and dismissed, Commander. Execute my orders. The channel closed. Xerx stood on the bridge of his own command ship, surrounded by officers who looked to him for guidance. He had served the Kryn sovereignty for 70,000 years. He had never once disobeyed a direct order from the Supreme Overlord, but he had also never once been ordered to lead his people into certain annihilation. Commander? His second officer spoke quietly. What are your orders? Before Xerx could respond, every display on every ship in the fleet suddenly activated simultaneously. A message appeared, broadcast on all frequencies, cutting through Kryn encryption as if it did not exist. A human face appeared on the screens. A man with graying hair and calm, intelligent eyes. He wore a simple uniform with minimal decoration. I am Admiral Marcus Webb of Terran Strategic Command, the man said. His voice was steady and clear. Your fleet has entered a controlled engagement zone. You are completely surrounded. Your weapons systems have been locked within dimensional containment fields. Your engines are operating within spatial loops that we control. Admiral Webb paused, letting the words sink in. You are not in a battle. You are in a cage. And the only way you leave this cage is by listening very carefully to what I say next. On his throne, Supreme Overlord Taxus snarled with rage. Fire all weapons. Destroy every human ship in range. Now. 2,500 Kryn warships opened fire simultaneously. The combined firepower was staggering. Energy beams that could vaporize mountains, missiles that could crack continental plates, plasma weapons that burned hotter than stellar cores. The Kryn unleashed enough destructive power to sterilize a dozen planets. The weapons struck the human ships and simply stopped existing, not reflected, not absorbed, not deflected. The energy beams, the missiles, the plasma bolts reached the perimeter around the human vessels and ceased to be. They vanished as if they had never been fired at all, dot across the Kryn fleet. Weapons officers stared at their displays in confusion and growing horror. Their targeting systems showed successful firing sequences. Their energy reserves showed the massive power expenditure. But the human ship sat there completely untouched, as if protected by invisible walls that reality itself could not penetrate. Impossible, Doxus whispered. This is impossible. Admiral Webb's face remained on the screens, his expression unchanged. Your weapons operate within the standard dimensional framework. Our defensive barriers exist partially outside that framework. From the perspective of your weapons, our ships are not entirely in the same universe. You cannot harm what you cannot fully reach. He gestured, and a holographic display appeared beside his image. It showed technical readouts that the Kryn scientists immediately recognized as dimensional phase shift technology, but operating at scales and efficiency levels that should have required another 1,000 years of development. Now let me show you what our weapons can do, Admiral Webb said quietly. A single human ship, sleek and dark and wrong in ways that hurt to look at, fired once. The beam that emerged was not light or plasma or any form of energy the Kryn understood. It was a ripple in the fundamental structure of reality itself, a wave of uncreation that traveled faster than thought. It struck a Kryn heavy cruiser on the outer edge of their formation. The ship did not explode. It did not burn. It simply stopped existing. One moment, a massive vessel carrying 8,000 crew occupied that space. The next moment, there was nothing. Not wreckage, not debris, not atoms. The ship had been erased from reality as completely as if it had never been built. Throughout the Kryn fleet, sensors registered the impossible event. Their instruments showed the space where the ship had been, showed the quantum signatures of something that had ceased to exist on a fundamental level. Panic began to spread like fire through dry grass. That was one ship at minimum power, Admiral Webb said. His voice held no triumph, no satisfaction, only statement of fact. We have 4,300 vessels in this engagement zone. We can erase your entire fleet from existence in approximately 47. He leaned forward slightly, and for the first time, his expression showed something beyond calm professionalism. It showed sadness. But we do not want to do that. We are not conquerors. We are not executioners. We are people who simply want to be left alone to live our lives in peace. He paused. I am offering you the same choice you have offered countless other species. Surrender or cease to exist. But unlike your sovereignty, when we say surrender, we mean it. We will not enslave you. We will not destroy your culture. We will simply send you home with a message. Never return. On the bridge of his command vessel, Fleet Commander Xerix made a decision that would define the rest of his existence. He opened a direct communication channel to Supreme Overlord Thaxus. Your Excellence, we must surrender. There is no shame in acknowledging superior force. We can... No. Thaxus's voice was raw with fury and something else. Something Xerix had never heard from his overlord before. Fear. The Kryn sovereignty does not surrender. We would rather die with honor than submit to primitives. All ships, ramming speed. If we cannot destroy them with weapons, we will destroy them with our hulls. Xerix felt ice form in his chest. Daxus had gone mad. The ancient overlord would rather kill every being in the fleet than admit defeat. I am sorry, Your Excellence, Xerix said quietly, but I cannot allow that. He closed the channel to Thaxus and opened a fleet-wide broadcast. This is Fleet Commander Xerix. I am assuming emergency command. Authority under Provision Omega of the Sovereignty Military Code. Supreme Overlord. Thaxus is hereby relieved of command due to impaired judgment in a crisis situation. Across the fleet, ship commanders looked at each other in shock. What Xerix had just done was treason of the highest order. The punishment for removing a supreme overlord from power was immediate execution followed by the extinction of one's entire bloodline. But looking at their sensors, looking at the human ships that could erase them from existence with a thought, every commander in the fleet made the same calculation. Better to be tried for treason than erased from reality, one by one. The ship commanders signaled their support for Xerix's action.earex, opened a channel to the human flagship. Admiral Webb's face appeared on his screen. Admiral Webb, Xerix said, his voice heavy with the weight of 6 million years of Kryn pride crumbling. I am Fleet Commander Xerix. I have assumed command of the Kryn fleet. We accept your terms. What do you require of us? Admiral Webb's expression softened slightly, and Xerix saw something unexpected in the human's eyes. Not triumph, not gloating, something that looked almost like relief. Stand down all weapon systems, Webb said. Shut down all engines. Prepare to be escorted out of Terran space under our supervision. Any ship that deviates from the designated course will be removed from existence. Any ship that makes hostile movements will be removed from existence. Follow these instructions exactly, and you will all go home alive. Xerix felt something he had not experienced in 70,000 years of service. Hope. Fragile. Uncertain hope that this nightmare might end without total annihilation. Understood, Admiral. We comply. Throughout the Kryn fleet, weapons powered down. Engines went silent. 2,500 warships, the pride of an empire that had ruled for 6 million years, sat motionless in space. Surrounded by an enemy they could not fight, saved by mercy they had never shown to anyone else on Earth. In a secure command center buried 3 miles beneath the surface, Commander Sarah Chen watched the final surrender on her display screens. Around her, officers cheered and embraced, celebrating a victory achieved without firing more than a single demonstration shot. Chen allowed herself a small smile. 180 years of preparation. 180 years of hiding their true capabilities. 180 years of letting the galaxy believe humanity was weak and primitive. All of it had led to this moment. Send a message to all Terran defense installations, she said quietly. Protocol Sentinel has concluded successfully. The Kryn fleet is contained. Begin Phase 2 of the operation. Her second officer approached. Commander, what is Phase 2? Chun turned to look at him, and her smile grew slightly wider. Teaching the galaxy that there is a better way than conquest. That power and mercy can coexist. That strength means having the ability to destroy your enemies and choosing not to. She looked back at the screens, showing the surrendered Kryn fleet. We are going to show them what humanity learned the hard way. That the strongest species is not the one that conquers. It is the one that protects. Anew dawn, the throne chamber of the Dominion's fist was silent, except for the sound of Supreme Overlord, Daxus breathing heavily, his ancient chest heaving with rage and disbelief. He stood surrounded by his own guard, soldiers who had served him for millennia now blocking his path to the command consoles. You dare, Daxus whispered, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. You dare commit treason against me. Against the sovereignty. Against 6 million years of unbroken rule. Fleet Commander Xerix stood before his former master, his massive frame rigid with military discipline, even as he committed the greatest crime in Kryn law. I dare because someone must, Your Excellence. Our people are minutes away from total extinction. I will not allow your pride to kill us all. Pride? Daxus laughed, a broken sound that echoed through the chamber. This is not pride. This is principle. The Kryn sovereignty does not bow. We do not surrender. We do not acknowledge defeat. To do so is to destroy everything we have built across millions of years. What we have built, Zarek said quietly, is a legacy of conquest and cruelty. Perhaps it is time for that to end. Daxus lunged forward, but the guards intercepted him gently but firmly. The ancient overlord stared at them with wide, uncomprehending eyes. These were his personal protectors, beings who had sworn absolute loyalty to him, and now they stood between him and his own authority. The fleet has spoken, Your Excellence, one of the guards said softly. We will not die for the sake of maintaining an image, not when survival is offered. Xerix turned away from the broken overlord. Confine him to his chambers. Treat him with respect, but keep him under guard. When we return home, there will be a proper tribunal to address what has happened here. As the guards escorted Daxus away, the ancient being's voice echoed through the corridor. You will all be executed for this. Your families will be erased. Your names will be cursed throughout eternity. Xerix watched him disappear, then activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Fleet Commander Xerix. We have surrendered to the human forces. This was not an easy decision, but it was the only decision that preserves our people. Stand down all systems and await further instructions from Terran Command. Any ship that violates this order will answer to me personally. He closed the channel and stood alone on the bridge, feeling the weight of 6 million years of history pressing down on his shoulders. He had just ended an era. What would come next, he could not imagine. The escort formation took 3 days to reach the border of human space. 3 days during which 2,500 Kryn warships traveled in complete silence, surrounded by human vessels that watched their every movement with technology that made Kryn sensors look like primitive observation tools. Science officer Kalara spent those 3 days analyzing everything her instruments could detect about the human ships. The more she learned, the more impossible it all seemed. The human vessels existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensional folds that intersected reality at quantum-level precision. Their engines operated on principles that Kryn science said should not work, converting dimensional stress directly into thrust without any conventional reaction mass. Their weapons could unmake matter at the subatomic level, erasing things from existence by severing their connection to the fundamental quantum fields that define reality itself. And perhaps most remarkably, they had possessed this technology for at least 50 years based on the manufacturing signatures she detected. 50 years of hiding capabilities that would have made them the most powerful force in the known galaxy. 50 years of pretending to be weak while building an invisible empire of dimensional science. Why? She whispered to herself in her laboratory. Why hide? Why not use this power to claim territory, to demand respect, to become the new dominant force? Because that is not who they are. Kalara spun to find Fleet Commander Xerix standing in her doorway. She had not heard him approach. Commander, I apologize. I did not realize you were... Xerix waved away her concern and entered the laboratory. I have been asking myself the same question, Officer Kalara. I have been trying to understand these humans. So I requested a conversation with their Admiral Webb. He granted it. You spoke with him? Kalara's eyes widened. What did he say? He told me humanity's history, Xerix said quietly. He moved to stand beside her at the observation window, looking out at the human ships, maintaining their vigilant escort. They had empires once, on their own world. Civilizations that conquered and enslaved each other for thousands of years. They know what it means to be the conquered, to be the oppressed, to be helpless against superior force. Xerix's voice grew thoughtful. When they reached the stars and discovered the wider galaxy, they found only more empires. More conquest? More species grinding others beneath their power. And humanity made a choice. They decided they would never be victims again. but they also decided they would never become victimizers. So they prepared, Kellara said softly, understanding dawning. They built weapons and defenses not to conquer, but to ensure they could never be conquered. Exactly. Admiral Webb called it deterrence through overwhelming capability. They made themselves so dangerous that attacking them would be suicide. But they kept that danger hidden so no one would feel threatened enough to try destroying them preemptively. Zarek shook his head in amazement. It is strategic thinking on a level I have never encountered. Not just military strategy, but cultural strategy spanning generations. What else did he tell you? He said that humanity has been watching the Kryn sovereignty for 180 years. They have detailed records of every species we have conquered, every world we have destroyed, every act of cruelty our empire has committed. Zarek's voice dropped. He showed me evidence of campaigns I had participated in, battles I had commanded. He showed me the cost in lives and suffering that our conquests created. Kellara saw something she had never witnessed before. Fleet Commander Zarek, one of the most powerful military leaders in the sovereignty, had tears forming in his eyes. I have served the Kryn for 70,000 years, he said quietly. I believed we were bringing order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. I believed we were making the galaxy better. He paused. Admiral Webb showed me that we were simply the latest in a long line of empires that justify their cruelty with noble words. What did you tell him? I asked him why they did not destroy us. Why they showed mercy when we would have shown none. Zarek turned to face Kellara directly. Do you know what he said? She shook her head. He said, because we remember what it feels like to be helpless. Because we know that violence creates cycles that never end. Because we believe that even people who have done terrible things can change if given the opportunity. Then he asked me a question that I cannot stop thinking about. What question? He asked, if we destroy you, what do we become? Just another empire imposing our will through force. We did not prepare for 180 years to become what we despise. Kellara absorbed these words in silence. The implications were staggering. A species with the power to dominate the galaxy, choosing instead to simply protect themselves. An empire that could have been deliberately choosing not to be. Commander, she said carefully, what will happen when we return home? What will the sovereignty do with this knowledge? Zarek looked out at the stars, his expression unreadable. That depends on whether we are wise enough to learn from it. At the border of human space, Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship, Sentinel, and watched the Kryn fleet prepare to cross back into their own territory. Beside him, Commander Sarachan had arrived to witness the final stage of Protocol Sentinel. All Kryn vessels are showing minimal power signatures, the tactical officer reported. No weapons active, no targeting systems engaged. They are maintaining the agreed formation. Good, Webb said. He opened a communication channel to Fleet Commander Zarek's ship. Commander Zarek, you are approaching the border. Once you cross, our escort will end, and you will be free to proceed home. Zarek's face appeared on the main display. Understood, Admiral Webb. Before we depart, I wish to clarify the terms you presented. The demilitarized zone, the liberation of enslaved species, the Tribunal for Supreme Overlord, Taxus. These are not negotiable. They are not, Webb confirmed. But neither are they impossible. We are not asking you to dismantle your entire civilization, Commander. We are asking you to stop expanding it through conquest and to free those you have already conquered in the region near our space. And if elements of the sovereignty refuse, if there are those who see surrender as unacceptable weakness, Webb's expression hardened slightly. Then those elements will discover what happens when they violate terms agreed upon with humanity. We showed mercy once, Commander Zarek. We will not show it again. Make certain your people understand that. Zarek nodded slowly. I will make them understand, Admiral. You have my word. There is one more thing, Commander Chun interjected. She stepped forward, her expression serious. We will be monitoring the border region closely. Very closely. If we detect any Kryn military vessels within the demilitarized zone, If we receive reports of continued conquest near our territory, if the enslaved species are not freed as promised, we will respond with military action? Xerix asked. With justice, Chun replied. We will free those species ourselves if necessary. We will impose sanctions. We will make continued conquest impossible for your empire. She paused. We do not want war, Commander, but we will not allow the cycle of cruelty to continue unopposed. Not anymore. Xerix studied both human officers for a long moment. Then he straightened and offered a formal Kryn salute, his forearms crossing over his chest in a gesture of respect reserved for worthy adversaries. The Kryn fleet will honor the terms. Admiral Webb, Commander Chun. This I swear on my name and bloodline. We will free the enslaved species. We will establish the demilitarized zone. And we will ensure that Supreme Overlord Thaxis faces judgment for his actions. He lowered his arms. Perhaps more importantly, we will begin asking ourselves the questions you have forced us to confront. Questions about who we are and who we wish to become. That is all we ask, Webb said quietly. Safe journey, Commander Xerix. May we meet again under better circumstances. The channel closed. The Kryn fleet crossed the border and continued into their own space, moving away from human territory in perfect formation. On the bridge of the Sentinel, the crew erupted in restrained celebration. They had done the impossible. They had faced the greatest military power in the known galaxy and sent them home without a full-scale battle, without genocide, without becoming the very thing they had prepared to defend against. Admiral Webb allowed the celebration to continue for exactly 30 seconds, then raised his hand for silence. Excellent work, everyone. But our job is not finished. Commander Chen, begin Phase 2 operations. I want monitoring stations established throughout the demilitarized zone. I want intelligence assets tracking Kryn military movements. And I want regular contact with this species they have enslaved to ensure the liberation process proceeds as agreed. Already in progress, Admiral, Chun replied with a slight smile. We started deploying assets the moment the Kryn fleet surrendered. Webb returned the smile. Of course you did. Excellent initiative. He turned to address the entire bridge crew. What we have accomplished here will echo throughout the galaxy. Other species will learn that the Kryn can be stopped. Other empires will realize that conquest is no longer inevitable. We have proven that there is another way. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. But we must also remember that we have made powerful enemies today. The Kryn sovereignty will not forget this defeat. Elements within their empire will demand revenge. We must remain vigilant, remain prepared, and remain committed to the principles that guided us. Through this crisis, strength through deterrence, one of the officers said. Protection. Without domination, another added. Power with it. Responsibility, Chun concluded. These are the values that define humanity's presence in the galaxy. As long as we maintain them, we will be worthy of the strength we possess. Webb nodded approvingly. Exactly right. Now, let us go home. We have families waiting, lives to return to, and a civilization to continue building. The galaxy can wait for tomorrow. 6 months had passed since the Kryn fleet retreated from human space. 6 months during which the galaxy learned that the ancient empire could be defeated. 6 months during which everything began to change. The news spread through every trade route, every diplomatic channel, every communication network that connected the civilized worlds. A young species called humanity had faced the Kryn sovereignty and refused to surrender. They had surrounded the greatest fleet ever assembled and offered terms instead of annihilation. They had demonstrated technology that should not have existed and used it only to defend, never to conquer. For species that had lived under the shadow of Kryn expansion for millions of years, the news was transformative. Hope began to grow where only resignation had existed before. On the Kryn throne world of Krynith Prime, the transformation was even more dramatic. Supreme Overlord Thaxis had been formally removed from power and placed under house arrest awaiting tribunal. Fleet Commander Xerix had become Lord Provisional. leading a temporary council tasked with reforming the sovereignty's government. The process was painful and chaotic. Conservative elements within the empire demanded that Xerxes be executed for treason and the fleet rebuilt for revenge against humanity. Progressive factions argued for complete dismantling of the conquest-based system. Moderate voices tried to find middle ground that would preserve stability, while addressing the fundamental problems the humans had exposed. Xerxes stood in what had once been Vax's private council chamber, now converted into a meeting hall for the Provisional Council. Around him sat representatives from dozens of conquered species, beings whose peoples had served the Kryn as subjects for thousands of years. They were not asking for revenge. They were asking for freedom. The humans have provided us with detailed records, Xerxes said, addressing the assembly. Records of 35 species within 80 light years of their border who remain under Kryn occupation, as per our agreement. These species will be granted immediate independence and full sovereignty over their worlds. That is nearly 40% of our resource base in that sector, one of the old guard Kryn administrators protested. The economic impact will be catastrophic. Then we will learn to build an economy that does not rely on enslaved labor, Xerxes replied firmly. The alternative is war with humanity, and I have seen what that means. Total extinction. There is no third option. He activated a holographic display showing the liberation timeline. The first 10 species will be freed within the next 2 months. Human observers will monitor the process to ensure compliance. This is not negotiable. Another counselor, this one from the military faction, stood. Lord Provisional, the fleet is demanding reassurance. They want to know if this liberation is the beginning of the sovereignty's complete dissolution. They want to know if we are surrendering our entire empire to appease the humans. Xerxes met the counselor's gaze steadily. Tell the fleet that we are not surrendering our empire. We are transforming it. We are evolving from a civilization built on conquest to one built on something more sustainable. He paused. And tell them that I have spoken with representatives from humanity about what comes next. The chamber fell silent. The humans have offered to share certain technologies with us, Xerxes continued. Not their weapons, not their dimensional science, but medical advances, agricultural improvements, educational resources. They are willing to help us transition to a post-conquest economy if we demonstrate genuine commitment to reform. Why? Someone asked from the back of the chamber. Why would they help us after what we tried to do to them? Xerxes pulled up a message on his personal display. He had read it 100 times since receiving it, trying to understand the thinking behind it. This is from Admiral Webb, he said, projecting the message for all to see. It says, we help you because we believe civilizations can change. We help you because we would rather have peaceful neighbors than defeated enemies. We help you because the alternative is watching your empire collapse into chaos, which would destabilize the entire sector and potentially harm innocent populations. We help you because it is the right thing to do. The chamber remained silent as the counselors absorbed these words. The humans operate from principles we do not fully understand, Xerxes admitted. They possess overwhelming power, but choose to use it sparingly. They could have destroyed us, but preferred to change us. They see beyond immediate advantage to long-term stability. He looked around at the assembled faces. Perhaps it is time we learn to think the same way. On one of the first worlds to be liberated, a planet called Volthera, celebrations filled the streets for the first time in 40,000 years. The Veltheran people had been conquered so long ago that most current residents had only known life under Kryn occupation. Freedom was a concept from ancient history books. Now Kryn administrators were peacefully departing in transport ships while Terran observers documented the transition. Human aid workers were helping establish new governmental structures, providing food and medical supplies, and offering technical assistance to rebuild infrastructure that the Kryn had neglected. Elder Soraya, the oldest living Veltheran at 340 years old, stood in the central plaza of the capital city and watched Terran engineers, helping to repair the ancient temple that the Kryn had converted into a storage facility. Tears streamed down her weathered face. A young Terran woman approached her gently. Elder Soraya. I am Lieutenant Maria Santos from Terran Humanitarian Corps. Is everything all right? Soraya nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she finally found her voice, it trembled with emotion. I was a child when the Kryn came. I watched them destroy our cities, kill our leaders, enslave my people. I never thought I would see freedom again. Never. Lieutenant Santos took the old woman's hand carefully. You are free now, Elder. Truly free. The Kryn have agreed to complete withdrawal, and we will ensure they honor that agreement. Why? Soraya asked the same question so many had asked. Why you help us? We are nothing to you. We have nothing to offer humanity. Santos smiled gently. You are people who deserve to be free, Elder Soraya. That is enough. Humanity knows what it means to suffer under oppression. We know what it means to be helpless. We swore that when we became strong enough, we would help those who cannot help themselves. This is us keeping that promise. Will you stay? Soraya asked hopefully. Will humanity protect us if the Kryn return? The Kryn will not return, Santos said with quiet certainty. We have made that very clear to them. But, yes, we will maintain a small monitoring presence in this system for as long as you wish. We will not govern you. We will not interfere in your sovereignty. But we will ensure no one takes that sovereignty away from you again. Soraya squeezed the young woman's hand. Her eyes filled with gratitude beyond words. Thank you. Thank you for giving us our future back. Similar scenes were playing out across 35 worlds, as species tasted freedom for the first time in millennia. And with each liberation, the message spread further through the galaxy. The old order was changing. The age of unopposed conquest was ending. A new era was beginning, defined not by the strongest imposing their will, but by the strongest choosing to protect the weak. On Earth, Admiral Marcus Webb had indeed retired to his small house by the ocean. He spent his days walking along the beach, listening to the waves, and occasionally teaching at the local university, where he gave lectures on strategic thinking and ethical leadership. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, his communication device chimed. He considered ignoring it, then recognized the encryption signature. It was from Commander Chen. He activated the device. Chen's face appeared, and she was smiling. Marcus, I thought you would want to know. The tribunal for Thaxis concluded today. What was the verdict? Webb asked, though he could guess from her expression. Guilty on all counts, as expected. The sentence was life imprisonment with mandatory witness protocols. He will be required to observe every liberation, every reform, every step the Kryn sovereignty takes away from the system he built. Webb nodded slowly. Living long enough to see his legacy dismantled. Poetic. There's more, Chun continued. Zarek sent a message. He is requesting a formal meeting between the Kryn Provisional Council and Terran Command. He wants to discuss a mutual non-aggression pact and possible future alliance. Webb raised his eyebrows. An alliance? That is ambitious. He specifically referenced your conversation with him about how violence creates cycles that never end, and how giving people the opportunity to change can break those cycles. Chun's smile widened. I think we may have actually done it, Marcus. We may have actually transformed an entire empire through demonstration of principle. Do not celebrate yet, Webb cautioned, though he was smiling too. True change takes generations. The Kryn have 6 million years of conquest culture to overcome. There will be setbacks, resistance, probably violence from hardline factions. But there will also be progress, Chen countered. Species are being freed. Systems are being reformed. The galaxy is learning that there is another way. She paused. We proved that strength and compassion can coexist. That is going to echo for a long time. Webb looked out at the ocean, watching the waves roll endlessly to shore. I hope you are right, Sarah. I truly do. Will you come out of retirement for the meeting with Derek's? He considered for a moment, then shook his head. No, this is for the next generation now. You handle it. I have faith in you. Marcus, we could not have done any of this without your leadership. You would have found a way, Webb said gently. Humanity always finds a way. That is what makes us special, not our weapons or our technology, but our stubborn refusal to accept that the universe has to be cruel. He closed the connection and returned to watching the sunset. Somewhere, out there, across vast distances of space, entire civilizations were being reborn. Species that had known only oppression were experiencing freedom. An empire built on conquest was learning to build something better. And humanity, the species that had hidden its strength for nearly 2 centuries, had shown the galaxy that true power was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to build. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, conflicts to resolve, setbacks to overcome. But for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy had hope. And hope. Webb reflected as the last light faded from the sky. Was the most powerful force in the universe. 5 years later, the memorial beacon at the border of Terran. Space had become famous throughout the galaxy. Ships from dozens of species made pilgrimages to see it, to read its message, to understand what had happened there. The message had been updated recently. It now read, "Beyond this point lies Terran space. Humanity asks only to be left in peace. We possess the capability to defend ourselves against any threat, but we prefer to extend friendship to all who approach with good intentions. To those who would conquer. Remember that mercy is a gift. We offered it once to the Kryn sovereignty. They accepted, and both our civilizations are better for it. We hope others will learn from their example. To those who seek alliance, you are welcome. Approach with respect, leave with friendship, and know that humanity judges species not by their past, but by their commitment to a better future. To those who simply travel through, safe journey. May you find what you seek among the stars. This beacon stands as a reminder. The strongest species is not the one that conquers, but the one that protects. Not the one that dominates, but the one that uplifts. Not the one that inspires fear, but the one that gives hope. The galaxy is changing. We invite you to change with it." And across the vast expanse of space, species were accepting that invitation. Old empires were reforming. New alliances were forming. The cycle of endless conquest that had defined galactic civilization for millions of years was finally beginning to break. It would not happen overnight. It would not be easy. But it would happen because humanity had proven it was possible. And hope, once kindled, is very difficult to extinguish.